Good morning to you and a very, very warm welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Monday morning. Hope you are well and you hope you had a lovely weekend, and I'm so glad you could be here this morning. Now, my friends, Jesus often used analogies from, you might say, object lessons from life to make his point. So he talked about and things that people could see in everyday life so that people could understand easier about the kingdom of God. So we talked about things like trees and birds and seeds and sheep, everyday things that people could see to make his point about the kingdom of God. And Paul did exactly the same thing. And in this morning's reading, he talks about games. Now, the Greeks and Romans loved their games. In Greece, the big one at the time was obviously the Olympic Games, which still go on today internationally. But the second after that were what's called the Isthmian Games. And these were huge as well, second only to the Olympics. And these used to happen every 2 years in Corinth, where Paul is writing to. It actually happened in 49 AD, just before Paul went, and it happened in 51 AD while Paul was there. And so the Corinthians knew all what games looked like. They understood all about athletes preparing their bodies and getting fit and disciplined and so on for the games to win the prize. And that's the analogy Paul uses this morning. So without further ado, thinking about games and athletes and preparation and fitness and so on, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, starting to read at verse 19, Paul writes, "For though I am free with respect to all, I've made myself a slave to all, so I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, so I might win the weak. I've become all things to all people, that I might by all means save some. I do it for the sake of the gospel, so I may share in its blessings. Do you not know that in the race that runners all compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as though beating the air, but I punish my body and enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself should not be disqualified." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, my friends, as I've already established, Paul is absolutely passionate about the gospel of Jesus Christ. He longs to see people come to know Jesus. And I think that's what he's talking about here, about the prize and the imperishable wreath, okay? He knows there's great reward in seeing other people become Christians. As somebody once said, there's only one thing greater than being in heaven, and that's seeing somebody else in heaven because you invited them. And Paul is absolutely passionate about God, the gospel of Jesus Christ. He's desperate that other people can find faith in Jesus Christ too. But he also knows that if people are going to hear the gospel, then Christian people need to be out there in the world amongst them. How are people to hear the gospel if people don't tell them? And how are they going to hear it if Christians aren't out in the world? Which is why it's so important that we don't wrap ourselves up in holy huddles, but that Christians should be and must be absolutely out there in the world amongst people. Because if we're not out in the world, how on earth are people going to hear the gospel? But the complication is that in the world, as we all know, both inside and outside us, there are things that would distract us from the faith. So there are temptations, the world, the flesh and the devil. Mind you, there are temptations from inside and outside. There are messages that will get us down and distract us and pull us away. So in the world that we live in, there are also things that will distract us from our faith and dilute our faith and all that time and try and draw us away. So we need to be in the world, but we need to make sure that the world does not pull us in its direction. We absolutely must be amongst the people of the world, otherwise they're never going to hear the gospel. On the other hand, we must make sure that we don't let them, that we're not allowed to be distracted, that we keep our faith strong. And this is the point where Paul talks about discipline. And he uses the analogy of a runner preparing for a race. A runner has to be fit. A runner has to be disciplined. A runner has to work their body to make sure that they remain fit, that they remain strong, that they remain disciplined in order to win the prize. And I think I want to say three things to us this morning. We must, as I say, we must be in the world, but we must make sure that the world does not pull us into its own image, if you know what I mean. We need to remain strong in our faith so that we're not pulled away. And I want to say three things that we need to do this morning. I recommend to us this morning. Firstly, make sure that we keep praying. Now, we all do this in different ways, and we're all different people. And as I say, the way I pray now is very different to the way I used to pray 20, 30 years ago. And that's right. But whatever it is for you, make sure you're doing it. And make sure you're doing it, what you might say is in season and out of season. The way I do it, I say morning prayer every morning. Sometimes it's really inspiring. Sometimes it's almost like just saying the words. But at least it knows that every morning for a few minutes, I've got some time set apart for God. Now, it's different for everybody. Even if it's just listening to God while you're brushing your teeth or whatever it's going to be, make sure that you cut aside some regular time, which doesn't get changed, so that you can spend some time with. So make sure that you keep praying. Make sure that diplomatic relations between you and the kingdom of God remain open. And whatever it may be for a walk in the countryside or whatever it may be, make sure that you are regularly, talking, interfacing with God. That's the first thing. Second thing, get to know the stories of the Bible. Read the Bible regularly. Now, one of the reasons these talks are really good is because you're getting to hear quite a serious piece of the Bible every day. But get to know the stories of the Bible. Get to know how the Christian faith worked out for other people. Hear what the stories of Jesus, hear about Paul, the things that he did. Find out what God's really like. When I was, as I say, 18, 19, somebody bought me my first ever Bible. And after that, for the first time, I started to understand something about the God I believed in. So read the Bible or hear the Bible. Do something like this to these talks every day. Keep listening and keep getting to know the stories of the Bible. So keep praying regularly. Keep reading the stories of the Bible too. And thirdly, in the nicest possible way, go to church. And go to church, be part of a church, and go regularly. Honestly, the easiest way to go to church is to go every week. Go regularly. Now, the thing with the church is this. The church is full of fallible, ordinary human beings like you and I. And there will be times when the people in the church will drive you mad. There are times in the church that people drive me mad. And I'm sure I drive the church mad most of the time the way I am sometimes. But I do believe that one of the greatest things God's given us is each other. So keep going to church and keep going to church regularly. The analogy I always use is that my greatest sporting achievement, I used to be a rower. You can see pictures of it in that picture behind me there. And I used to have my oar used to go that way. And actually, if I thought about it, if I was rowing on my own, my oar goes one way, I'd be rowing around in circles. But I needed to be part of a crew, be part of a unit in order to make it work. And the same is true with the Christian faith too. We need to work together as a unit. So what Paul is saying in our reading this morning is we need to be involved in the world. If Christians like you and I are not in the world, then people are never going to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. We need to be. But we must make sure that the world does not distract us from our Christian faith. And the way Paul does it, and the way Paul's recommending to us, is that we've been regularly disciplined. That we make sure that our faith stays strong. So we need to pray regularly, read the Bible regularly, and be part of God's unit, be part of God's team, be part of the church, and do it regularly. And that way, as a crew, as a unit, we will come together and we too will win the prize, the imperishable wreath, the greatest prize of ever, which is heaven. It goes